Hello, everyone. My name is Ellie Horncole, a sophomore at Paul College and a marketing strategist with Voicey Digital. I'm honored to introduce the third speaker for today's symposium. With over 3 decades of experience, she has not only witnessed the evolution of marketing and PR, but has been a pioneering force in shaping it. Known as the Measurement Queen, Katie Delahaye is the founder of 2 measurement companies, Katie, Payne and Partners, Inc., and the Delahaye Group. Her books, Measure What Matters and Measuring Public Relationships, are considered must-reads for anyone tasked with measuring public relations and social media. Her latest book, written with Beth Cantor, Measuring the Networked Nonprofit Using Data to Change the World, is the 2013 winner of the Terry McAdam Book Award. Today, Katie will be sharing her insights into how AI will revolutionize our approach to preventing crises, measuring success, and improving results in marketing and PR. It is a great privilege to introduce the one and only Katie Delahaye Payne.
Thank you so much. It's a huge pleasure to be here. I've lived in Durham for about 50 or more years, and I always love coming to campus. So anytime you want me to come up and talk, I'm always happy to do that. But yeah, I will start off with my little background of AI. Just as it was starting to trickle out there, I had a client from Southwest and Southwest Airlines is probably one of the best measuring companies. They use RepTrack. They do everything you can possibly do to measure everything that they do. Totally data-driven company. And my client had just walked out of a meeting and she was furious and she said, "Damn it, Katie, why isn't there an answer to the question of how do you put an ROI, how do you measure the ROI of public relations?" And I was like, this is a question that we've been dealing with for about 35 years. But AI, ChatGPT had just come, into the spectrum, and I said, okay, let's ask ChatGPT. How do you measure the ROI? And it came back, and I'm like, gosh, that looks familiar. And I realized that basically what it had done is gone on the web and found all the things that I'd written on that particular topic and spit it back to me, which I then copied and pasted to my client, who didn't read the whole thing, that said, yes, this comes from ChatGPT. And she said, oh, well, that makes perfect sense. And I'm like, oh my God, this is a very scary thing because people don't necessarily know what is ChatGPT and what is not. I then sort of started to fall in love with it when I had an assignment from Porsche. And I mostly deal with B2B clients. And I thought I was going to teach them about measurement, which is what I do all the time. And she said, no, we want to know how to do better social media in the automotive space. I haven't taught social media marketing in decades, practically. ChatGPT came up with an outline. I was like, oh, those are really good ideas. And it literally, that was sort of my beginning of a love affair with it. The big thing that I, sort of have added into this presentation, and yes, it's all about crisis and everything else, is where AI and measurement and data really helps these days, because the marketing sieve, the marketing funnel is now a marketing sieve. It is basically, you have this, top funnel level of, oh yeah, I got my messages out there, or I reached these people, or whatever. But now there's all these other things that you can't control, and that's to a certain extent where public relations and reputation and everything else comes into play. This whole theory started when Microsoft was speaking at a conference I do, and they said, yeah, we had some interesting, insights into the changes that have come to our marketplace. She said, we did a bunch of research. This is an old client of mine that has done media monitoring, media measurement forever. And she'd just been put in more to the market research side. And she said, yeah, we did all this market research. And we discovered something very interesting, that the old white guys that we have assumed have been buying our products aren't there anymore. And in fact, it's a much younger audience. They have more authority at a younger age. And they only know Microsoft as the Xbox company. And here they were trying to sell enterprise software systems to people who thought, but they're the Xbox company. This is why you need data. This is why you need to make sure you have all your data, because your audience is going to be very different than it was 5 years ago. And that audience is not just waiting for you to drop messages onto it. That audience is searching for solutions. And they're now searching for solutions in ChatGPT, in Bard, and Claude, and all the rest of those things. So what you want to do is you want to get them from that search to finding your solution. And the problem is the fact that, yeah, you've got all these tools in your toolbox that you can control more or less, you know, paid media and earned media and spokespeople and events and all those other things that you do so well. But on the other side, you have things like review sites that you can't control. You have politics. You have cultural issues, culture war issues. You have your local communities that who knows what's going to happen. And the next thing you know, instead of finding a solution, there are pitchforks at the gate, and all of a sudden you're the subject of a major crisis. And what you really need to do is think about, how am I going to measure not just all that nice stuff that is easy to measure, but how am I going to measure the other stuff? And that is, to a certain extent, where I comes in. One thing that has really revolutionized at least some of the PR world for us is just the AI use of using the Google search mechanisms and certain tools out there like SparkToro. Anybody here ever heard of SparkToro? Fabulous tool. You can put it in there and say who's searching for a topic. And since I do a lot of B2C stuff, especially in life sciences, it's not like who's looking for a new car, right? You're gonna get millions and millions of responses. But if I want to know who's using AI in diagnostic, who's searching for AI in diagnostics, it's going to come up with 500 people who are actually interested in that topic. It's going to tell me what the podcasts are that they listen to, what media they're listening to, who they pay attention to, all kinds of stuff that I did not know before. And we'll get back to that. But it's very interesting when you put your questions into these systems out there, and you find that the people who are searching for your answers are not the people that you're targeting. So for instance, for this particular client, it turns out that it was, put my glasses on here, associations, particularly disease associations and governments, that were looking for those answers. Well, that wasn't in their target audience. They had no idea. Right? They were targeting doctors and hospitals and people who buy for hospitals. So the unknown out there is getting bigger all the time, and it's going to be up to you guys to kind of use these tools to make sure that you are, in fact, finding the right people, making sure that they're actually hearing you. So let's talk a little bit about how you can prevent crises and what AI is doing in crisis. Now, this is actually not the most sophisticated recent story, because this started 3 years ago when AI was the topic of, we do a measurement summit. We used to do it in my house, now we do it online. It was a big discussion about AI in public relations and earned media. And everybody was like, that's the future. This is like 3 or 4 years ago. It's the future. It's going to be, what's going to happen next year? It's all going to be about AI. And I'm like, I don't buy it. It's not going to do anything. Frankly, it's not going to help anybody in the communications business until it can tell them when a crisis is brewing, tell them what kind of a crisis it is, tell them what the best response is, and tell them how soon it's going to go away. And we're a long way from doing that, and therefore AI is just a whole bunch of fluff. A guy called Oliver Gagarin, who I have known for years, calls me up 2 weeks later and goes, I can do that. And I said, I don't believe you. And he said, design the experiment and we will prove it. Now, in the world, anybody hear of Tim Coombs? Tim Coombs? you know anything about, he's like one of the great gurus of crisis. And has written crisis theories and how to respond and all the structured academic work about crisis has come from Professor Coombs. So I'm like, I'm not going to do any of this stuff without him. So he's going to design this experiment. And so we decided that we would take 3 different types of crises. Now, one of the things that Coombs does is say, there are X number of different types of crises. I'm not going to go into all of them, but there's accidental crises, and there's self-inflicted crises, and there's he's got all these categories. And at a conference, I had heard him say, we have figured out, and through testing and academic rigor and all kinds of other things, how to respond to crises best if it is an accidental crisis, if it is all these things. There is no good response for a self-inflicted crisis. Good point. If you start to think about some of these self-inflicted crises around today, you might agree with him. So what we did is we found 3 and identified 3 self-inflicted crises that we would test this theory on. Now, the Full Intel is the company that actually Gagarin runs. They have something like 40 years worth of human and computer-coded data on companies and on crises from news media, right? They've been in the business for as long as I have, and they've just collected it all, and it's all there. So he basically sets up this model and goes back 40 years and teaches this model on 40 years worth of data how to identify a brewing public relations crisis. And then he teaches it, and I don't know how he did this, but basically this is AI at work, how to identify a self-inflicted human error crisis. And so we picked out 3 from the data that he had enough data on. The Boeing 737 MAX, accidental toddler death on an ocean liner, or on a ship, and the WeWork CEO blowing up. So we said, okay, let's take those and see what happens. Ran it through their system. And naturally we said, we're not going to believe AI, because I wasn't going to believe AI. And we had their trained humans also look at the same data to compare the results. I mean, basically intercoder reliability was being tested here. And we also defined the effectiveness of the response, right? So you have all these different responses you could choose. They identified the responses, AI identified the responses. And then we said, okay, the way we define most effective is the crisis that gets back to neutral, from negative coverage to neutral coverage, the fastest. What's the shortest period back to neutrality? So we did that. And it turns out, this is just the first round, that AI correctly identified a brewing crisis, a type of crisis, and the type of crisis response unbelievably effectively. I mean, I was so blown away by this data, and this is, again, 3 years ago. 97% response, 96% agreement with humans, great data, whatever. And so we came up with, this basic conclusion. With sufficient data and very clear definitions of success, AI could determine the most effective response in a self-inflicted crisis. And what we also found was that it was a way of showing that stupid responses to crisis, which we see all the time, are the least effective, and they're only going to extend your crisis that much longer. So, for instance, if you deny it happened, if you attack the accuser, if you scapegoat the victim, or say no comment, chances are pretty good that your crisis is going to go on and on and on. If you give as much information as possible, apologize dramatically and profusely, do something to give people information, your crisis is going to go away soon. Now, a lot of this is like, duh. You learn this in basic, communications 101 and PR 101. But where it really helps, and this is really the takeaway from all this stuff, was we showed this to a whole bunch of students and professors and all kinds of people at this conference, and everybody goes, that's the chart I need to take in to the crisis war room when I'm fighting with the lawyers. Because what they needed was the data to prove that the good PR, good communications advice was correct. And they've since done this, many, many other times. It's now a product, but it is an unbelievable tool for companies that are facing, and want to know, where the crisis is coming. Now, that having been said, right, AI in measurement has been going on forever. I mean, RepTrak I'm sure, has been using machine intelligence for various things forever. Everybody has been using AI in various forms. They have all talked about it ad nauseum for years. About 7 years ago, we were sitting at the Measurement Summit, and every single vendor there was talking about how they were using AI, and none of them were. Basically, they were cleaning up their Boolean searches. I mean, it was absolutely nothing but BS. And so they've gotten better, right? In 7 years, they've definitely gotten better. They are using better intelligence. They are using true AI. There is a number of different companies that are doing really amazing stuff with it. There's a company called Conversion. They work with very large brands. One of the downsides is that you don't have a whole lot of data, this may not work, but what they can do is when they're working with a company that wants to know which aspect of reputational good is going to be better, right? I mean, so if I want to, stress diversity? Do I want to stress, my workplace equality? Whatever it is, get all these different characteristics you can pick from. They feed it all into their AI model, and they can tell which one is going to be more profitable, right? That's a model that is actually being used by many companies today and is driving probably a whole lot of marketing campaigns out there around various assorted, whether it's environmental or DEI or whatever the campaigns are. They're picking this stuff based on this kind of data. So the other thing that it does is it speeds up research, right? I mean, one of the things that I had to learn when I was doing a lot of life sciences work is how to translate this speeding up thing that AI does into some kind of a benefit. And I was talking to these scientists, and no offense to scientists, I'm sure there's some here, you're wonderful people and I love you, but you're not really good at marketing messages. And I spent so much time, and I finally got, after he said, well, we're taking all the failed trials, and we're putting it into the system, and then we're blah, 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 blah. Whole long explanation, and I said, well, so what does that mean to the patient? It means instead of waiting 3 weeks for your response, you can get your response in 3 hours. I'm like, okay, that's the message. It's speeding up research for us too, right? I mean, for us basically you can get data faster, which means that you should be using data more. And a lot of the problems has been, oh my God, a market research study is going to take forever, or oh my God, this research is going to take forever. It's not going to take that long. I mean, the analysis is getting better and faster almost every day. We did a 6,000 response survey, and we had insights in like a week, which used to take a whole lot longer to get there. Helps you interpret your data, right? It does, in fact, you can put data into Bard or ChatGPT and whatever, and get some sense of what's there. It's wonderful for analyzing open-ended questions, for example. It very quickly can look at a whole bunch of open-ended answers and come to some priorities as to what people are saying. All of that is all very true. You still need humans to get it right, because you still have to look at this stuff, as everybody has said before, to make sure that it really is in fact true. So we did an analysis. I wanted to figure out whether the Qatar got any, what its goals were from hosting the World Cup. And what we did was we said, what were the goals? The goals were to increase tourism, increase reputation, get to be known as a player in the Middle East, blah, 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 good place to visit, good place to do business. All those sort of subtle things, AI can do. It takes a long time to program it and get it right. So what we did is we took a bunch of human-coded data, put it into the system, came up with the answers. And what we found was, the answer is no, basically. That basically, given what they spent on it, and the revenue that they got from it, it was a net loss. But the image piece of it was equally bad. And what we found was, and you can imagine how much coverage there was of the Qatar World Cup. And you can see the whole study. I'm not going to go into all of it here, but basically what we found was that the discussions of human rights, of all the negative, all the controversial things, the banning of the LGBT things and the beer and all the rest of that stuff, actually drowned out a lot of those good messages. And we were able to do that because we could do that with all that coverage very, very quickly using AI. So that's the kind of thing that makes our lives a lot easier, where it used to be, oh my God, how could you ever do that? However, again, humans are necessary. AI is not going to get rid of us measurement types, because you still have to define what the messages are. You have to define what's good and what's bad. You have to define there's all kinds of things that human beings are still needed to do to define. So one of the things that Full Intel does, and I do, is sort of do a media quality score or a media impact score to basically look at a bunch of different factors to define a good article versus a bad article. And that's not sentiment the way machine intelligence and AI does it. It means very, very different things to different companies. Trust is another one that means, Microsoft has a different definition of trust than does United Healthcare, does anybody else. So all of these things have to be customized for the research project at hand. But once you do that and you define it well, AI can in fact actually help. It can in fact crunch the data. It's already presenting a whole, how many people here use or have gotten into Google Analytics 4? Yay, you'll all have jobs in quantity. Great, that's the best news I've had. I wish my clients were that into it. Anyway, GA4 is already using artificial intelligence. I get a little message that says, you have unusual activity, and you've got more events today, or you've got more conversions today, and what did you do yesterday? I mean, that kind of automated alert based on historical data is going to be incredibly valuable. It's going to change our lives, because we're going to get this data without saying, oh God, I've got to go open up Google Analytics, I've got to go look at that. It's telling you things that you would take hours and hours to figure out, or daily looking at this data. It's just going to pop up on your email, and you're going to go, oh, I need to go look at that, or I don't need to go look at that. So it's already using those and setting up conditions, and you can set up more on your own. I mean, it's basically, I'm just using the stuff that we set up automatically at the beginning, but it really does. Those automated insights are great. The custom insights are much more valuable. The ones that say, okay, you posted this on LinkedIn and you posted this on your blog, and all of a sudden we've got people going to this site and registering for this conference. So the big piece is, and you've heard this before today, but trust but verify, right? I mean, the stuff that comes up sometimes, I love it. Somebody on NPR said yesterday, that they were trying to get answers out of ChatGPT, and it didn't sound right. And he said, the next question to ChatGPT was, did you make this up? And the answer was yes. So, good way to verify. Did you make this up? Yes, okay. Keep your audience top of mind. That's all, it's basically, who are you talking to? Because you're not talking to ChatGPT, you're not talking necessarily. One of the things that we found, and I'm going to tell you about this little experiment we did in terms of copy, but if you're talking to serious scientists, right, you don't need listicles to get your information across. I mean, that's not going to work. So a lot of times people will get absolutely fascinated with various things that it comes up with. But if it doesn't resonate with your target audience, it's not going to work. Don't spend more time doing things in AI and trying to get things out of AI than it would be to just do it yourself, right? Use Canva, don't use the AI. This was an hour's worth of, I was trying to get a fight, an image of a battle between Claude, however you pronounce it, ChatGPT, and Bard. And I thought, somebody's got to have that. That's got to be out there. There's got to be an easier way. No. I ended up having to have a 3-way wrestling match and superimposing the logos on it. It was a ridiculous waste of time. Once you get down that rabbit hole, just get out of it and go do something else, because it's not a good answer. The other thing is, though, that what I was trying to do that image for was this analysis that we did, where we set the parameters and actually came up with different copy depending upon the system, and I'll show you the results. Yes, okay. So some things are out, the things that are really blowing up my world right now in terms of measurement, there's a company called One Count BI, and it's giving away the system, and it is, you sort of have to go get a demo to see it. It takes in data from a whole bunch of, like if you're a publisher or a university or anybody else, where you've got data on a bunch of different audiences, it's coming in from all kinds of different ways. They've applied AI to their system, and it can tell you anything you want to know about any particular person in their system. It's quite frightening, actually, but it's very slick. The test that we did depended upon, defining what best was. I wanted to know what was the best copy for promoting a particular course we were teaching. So best was the ability to drive traffic to the landing page so we could actually get some registrations for this thing. My colleague in all of this, who has been writing, journalist, has been writing copy for decades, many decades, wrote what he thought was a perfectly good piece of sort of press release / announcement of this course. Did his best, put a tag on it, put it up on his website, my website, and linked it. A few days later, take the same concept, put it into ChatGPT, Bard, and Claude, each with different tags. So we could tag, we knew which was going to drive the most traffic. And they were completely different in terms of content. One was a listicle, one was much more copy intensive, so we were very curious as to see which was actually going to get us more registrations. Turns out that Bard AI was better than Greg. I mean, better than my colleague there. He was second best, which made him feel good. ChatGPT was next, and Claude was the worst. And who knows why? And there are flaws with our experiment. We're going to improve it going down the road, because we're going to do this a lot. But that just gives you an idea of what you can do to actually both improve your copy and know what's going to work. You have to have that goal at the end to make sure that you know what best is and how you're actually going to judge the effects of your copy. Because if it's not working, go back to the drawing board. So that's essentially my stories about AI. It's not going to take your job. It's not going to take anybody in this room's job, because essentially you still need the understanding of who the audience is, as we said, what the subject matter is that the audience cares about, right? As long as you're making decisions based on data. Where I get really nervous about AI is if it sounds good. If it sounds good, it doesn't mean it's good, right? If it sounds right, it doesn't mean it's right. Ask it, did you make this stuff up? Or where's the data behind it? Because if it's not based on data, you're getting into the danger zone. You have to have your goals top of mind, because honest to God, if all the copy you want to do, it's still got to deliver the goals, whether it's generating leads, whether it's generating engagement, whatever it happens to be. And just use it for the things that it can do faster than you. And make sure you validate it with your own human intelligence. And that's it. Thank you very much. Do we have time for questions?
Would you ever use all three of those AI systems with each other on the same task, just to see what each one comes up with?
Well, that's essentially what we did. I mean, we basically gave it a set of facts and said, each one came up with something totally different. And then we tested it against the results in GA4. So what we're going to do slightly differently next time, the problem was that we started with a piece of copy that Greg wrote, put that into each one of them, and then used what they came up with. We didn't say in the voice of, or in the style of, or any of those other prompts, which we probably should have done. So the next time we're going to do it, we're going to do it with a few more parameters.
I can't wait to hear about it. And also, I know you talked about all the different systems and what you used, but if you had to say personally, which one would you consider to be your favorite? Either it could be unrelated to work or related to work. Which one has the best user experience?
Oh, that's a very different question. Let's see, best user experience. I like Bard, personally, Bard AI, because it seems to be more current, slightly faster, and the user experience is somehow better. It's not quite as complicated. I'm sure Microsoft would have different things to say about it, and they're a client of mine, so I have to be nice. But I've always liked Bard for AI purposes. Now, there's a lot of other things. I mean, I find this is going to shock the world. Anybody here care about public relations and earned media here? Is anybody PR majors? Okay. GA4 is the best thing to happen to PR in a very long time. That is my current soapbox that I'm on, because it can, in fact, really revolutionize how you measure PR. And then for other things, I mean, there's so many other research tools, and I always say, when everybody says, "Oh, but they're all so expensive," Excel is free, and I use it most of all. So, yes, there's some costs involved in some of these things, but there's an awful lot of other ways to get around it. Yes?
So you said that you had put Greg's prompt into the AI systems, correct?
Yes.
So what exactly were you hoping for it to change?
What we said was, take these facts, this content, and and make it more effective in terms of generating, in terms of generating traffic to a landing page. And so all three came up with very different things.
Do you think that like all three of them were effective in like different ways with like setting the tone and like things like that?
Well, they weren't. I mean, that's what we found was that Claude was not very effective. Do I think that there was a significant difference between any of them? That, statistically significant? Probably not. I mean, what it taught me was that I don't have to worry about it. I mean, I probably would go back and forth between Bard, ChatGPT-4, and sort of pick the best of the two. But it's a great way to start the process. I mean, that's the thing that it really taught me was Greg and I were writing copy the way we've always written copy, which is, we were journalists and we were marketers. We write the best, most beautiful copy you could possibly want, and it's not necessarily going to get us the best results. And so that's the thing that really made the difference was, Katie, just stop trying to be, I come from a long history, long family of writers, stop trying to channel your ancestors. Use ChatGPT and get a more effective, or Bard or whatever, get a more effective piece of content that's going to actually make you some money. My ancestors are currently planted over there, and you can see the ground, like they're just rolling.
Katie, so was Cotter your client, or were you doing the metrics for something else?
We were doing it. Yes, one of the things you get to do with public relations research is you don't have to wait around for them to for them to come to you. Yeah, no, I wanted to answer the question.
Yeah, I bet, because it was really interesting to watch, and there was a lot of media about how there was a lot of media. So my question is, had they been your client, having learned what you learned about how it went, and if they were, say, going to host again in 2 years, how would you advise them, given what happened and how very different it was than their outcome?
One of the things, I could actually, I don't know whether it'll show up, but anyway, the data showed that the Human Rights Watch and the human rights organizations, they were prepared, right? I mean, anytime you see when you go, wow, that's a really good response. They were, they'd planned on that for years, right? One of the interesting things about back in history when Planned Parenthood, something happened with Planned Parenthood, turns out that their response, which everybody was like, oh, isn't that a great response? And wasn't that effective? That had been planned out years in advance. So
The question, though, is given that we all could have predicted that was going to happen, and I don't think the response was incorrect. I think that was the correct response to the media for, hosting it and the media attention they got. That was negative. But given that we all saw that coming, how did they not plan differently?
Well, I think some of it has to do with the people. So, I mean, Human Rights Watch, everybody has, all of those spokespeople were well-trained, empathetic, accessible, all those things. If you do not have spokespeople who are well-trained, empathetic, credible, and accessible, go find some that are. I mean, just because your CEO has an ego the size of Manhattan does not mean that he gets to be the spokesperson, because that could be the worst thing you could possibly do. And I don't know what decisions went into either for the World Cup or for Qatar. Their spokespeople were terrible, and they had they were just like clueless. And that's, the press is going to get answers whether you like it or not. You might as well be there with the right answers faster than anybody else. And if you can't be that nimble, you're going to get nailed. You know, it's basically, I've been writing a column called Image Patrol for PR News now for, I think, 17 years or something. So I do about 4 a year. And it's basically, it started out as, here's an example of a crisis managed well, and here's an example of a crisis managed badly. I ran out of crises managed well a long time ago, right? It is now just, who handled this worse? And if you read those columns, actually, I should put them all into ChatGPT and see what the answer would be, because essentially every single time I say, you know, act first, you know, get as much information out there as possible. It's a theory of translucency. If you can't be totally transparent, be at least translucent and tell people you're giving them as much information as possible. Have good spokespeople, be clear on your goals and be clear on your messages. And it's not that complicated. It's just that when the lawyers get involved and you're sitting and you're having too much coffee in that crisis war room, everybody forgets, A, you should have data out there, and B, everybody forgets the basic rules of humanity because, oh my God, you know, it's going to cost this much more if we do it this way versus that. Well, yeah, but, and this is where RepTrack, thank God for RepTrack. I mean, you were the ones, basically RepTrack were the ones who told Southwest how to navigate through COVID. And their reputation, as much as they got nailed for all those different things, their reputation did not go down. It's one of the more amazing stories. But if you see that, I mean, when you see reputations that are still intact after a crisis, and you go back, it's mostly because they have good spokespeople. They do something, right? They don't just talk about promises. And they have, and the other thing is third party. Because a lot of times, no matter what you say, you're not going to have any credibility. You've got to have a bunch of third party influencers or experts or something out there that people will go to and make them available and train them or teach them or whatever.
Hi, Katie. I'm going to ask another question. I don't even know that it has that much to do with AI, but it may have to do with your response and the reputation that we've been talking about today. But because you just mentioned the Southwest and the 737 disaster, and of course we just had this Christmas disaster that Southwest has managed to go through, and it just seems their brand equity just pulls them through everything. Is there something they're actually doing right, or they just created so much brand equity over the years they just keep spending it and nobody seems to care?
I think RepTrack could probably give you the statistics on that, but I'll tell you the reason why they're so good at it, and I have been working with them off and on since they were in a teeny tiny little, their communications office was in a room smaller than this stage in a outbuilding in Texas. And they said to me, our mission and, you know, our whole goal is to give people the freedom to fly. And the way we give people the freedom to fly is by keeping things cheap. So we're not going to pay you in cash, we're going to pay you in tickets. And I'm like, okay. You know, they gave me a whole lot of, you know, Southwest Airlines tickets, and I was convinced. And then you get a little bit deeper into that. And it's that they want their employees to care as much as if they're owners, and they want customers to care as if they're owners or part of the company. And it's amazing that it's still there, despite, you know, losing a lot of the top brass that created that. But some of it is in their culture. And I think a lot of these companies that have survived some of these crises, it's just their cultural. Microsoft is a very interesting example because they had terrible crises millions of years ago. Some of it due to the, you know, at the top, not Bill Gates, but some of these subsequent CEOs. Satya Nadella came on board, and one of the first things he said was, corporate empathy is necessary for profit. He said, if we are not empathetic, and if we do not come across as empathetic to our customers and to our employees, we will fail. And their whole, you know, it's kind of amazing, because you kind of, when they were, doing good things in COVID, it was kind of like they're listening to people. And they do, and they really, really listen to people. So I think a lot of the reason why some of these companies have huge brand equity, good reputation in their banks, is just their culture. Because you can't fake it.
And someone passed me the mic, so I think I can help.
Yeah, oh, good. Okay, good. Yes, take it from here.
So this wasn't the first time Southwest went through a crisis, so they have learned quite a bit. With RepTrack, they track their customers and the general public, so they knew first things first, part of this was brand loyalty amongst these customers. They had built so much trust. And one of the things that I'm sure y'all went through when there was a crisis was looking for their benefit of the doubt. What is their level of benefit of the doubt? We're able to give them a score. So obviously, immediately after a crisis, the first thing you want to do is build trust.
Yep.
You've lost trust, let's build trust. Foundationally, let's first look at what is our benefit of the doubt? What's driving it? What makes us keep it? And then from there, we've got a baseline.
Yeah.
Next, let's look at trust. What do our clients need to hear? What worked last time? And like you said, what worked last time was being honest, having the executives at the forefront. And like I said, this isn't the first time they've had a crisis. There have been many times where they could have easily blamed an employee for something that's happened, and they didn't. They owned it, and that's their brand.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very fun. One of the things, somewhere I have it, it's like this totally unlikely chart. In the middle of COVID, you've got all the negative media and the RepTrack scores. And it was like, they both just kept getting better. It was like, the negative media was down here, RepTrack scores, reputation kept going up. I mean, it was just like, how do they do that? And it's just, they build it into their culture somehow. I don't know. Yes? Am I cutting into the break here? Oh, good. Oh, good.
How is the legal system going to deal with all the AI when like cases start developing because AI produced something inaccurate and it ruined a brand's reputation?
It's going to be on the person who used the AI. I mean, I think I'm very curious. Anybody got any insight as to what's going to be done next week with this big AI executive order? Watch this space. I'll be very curious as to see what happens. The EU is already making laws about AI. Biden's coming out with an executive order about it next week. I think we're going to start to see those lines be defined pretty soon in terms of legal liabilities and things like that.
Like, would they prosecute the company who is in the crisis, or would they also prosecute the AI companies as well for like being like having their models trained on that?
That remains to be seen. I have no idea. It'll be very interesting to see. I think some of it will depend. Part of the problem with the companies that developed it is like, it's what are you going to do? Sue all of them? I mean, I think it's going to be the choice of the person who used it. That would be my hunch. I don't know. I mean, they may decide to regulate all kinds of things, but.
Hi, Katie.
Hi.
I think it's interesting about the laws and regulations that are coming out, and I also think it's interesting how some people are really defending their human work versus AI-generated work, and especially artists who are now being using the hashtags.
Including Durham's own Joyce Maynard.
Yes, exactly. Not AI-generated, human art, etc. I was just wondering what your opinion is of that.
I think Joyce and all of those other authors have a very good legal case. I don't know how that's going to get resolved. I mean, part of the problem, it's like, our judges are, I mean, the people that are going to make decisions on these court cases are, you know, they're not exactly necessarily the most technologically savvy folks around there. Somebody in this audience, please grow up and become a judge. We've got to get some younger judges that are a little savvier. That's my fear, is the fact that the people that are going to be ruling on this stuff don't understand it well enough. And so what you're going to end up with, probably, is a whole bunch of smart lawyers battling it out, and the judge is going to, you know. Yes?
If any of these cases go to trial, I'll follow it closely.
Yes, please do. Let me know. I mean, I just think that it's going to be, especially health, you know, the whole health piece of this is another area where, you know, you raise the question about, you know, whose data is it? I mean, I worked with a company that's using tissues from an individual cancer, running it against a whole bunch of tests, using AI to find a cure for that particular cancer. Well, that's millions of tests out there that are being used. Who owns that data? You know, I think there's a lot of we're gonna go through this, that graph there of disappointment to at some point a better place. It's an interesting time.
Because I could see AI like having a lot of problems with HIPAA someday with healthcare.
Here's my feeling about HIPAA. As you pointed out, HIPAA is an old law. And when HIPAA makes things frustrating for patients, at some point it will be so frustrating that they will care less about their privacy and more about efficiency. I mean, there's rumblings about that now, that as important as HIPAA is, it also creates some real barriers to healthcare, to all kinds of other things happening. And I think that law will be changed. I think it will evolve, as so many do. Maybe. That it?